I know the world can't get you down.
You've no idea how hard it's been.
It's time to be awesome. I know the world can't get you down.
You've no idea how hard it's been.
It's time to be awesome. I know the world can't get you down.
You've no idea how hard it's been.
It's time to be awesome.
Hey there, fellow Maroons! Welcome to another After Map Part tutorial. Today, we're going to be focusing on a much requested topic, lip sync. For today's tutorial, I've loaded up a short sound clip for you guys, so to do a test animation to. In this tutorial, I'll be going through my approach to lip sync from start to finish. So let's get started. In TVPaint, I have a sound clip loaded here, so let me just play that for you guys so you have an idea of what we're going to be lip syncing. I just pulled it from a site that has a bunch of clips from TV shows, video games, and such like that. I believe this is an audio clip from, I believe it's Left 4 Dead 2, I think is what it said. So I've never played the game, but this is the clip I chose.
We got a boomer!
So yeah, it's very short, very simple, but it will demonstrate a lot of the techniques and pretty much give you guys a very quick understanding on how to approach lip sync. So first off, before we get started, I'm going to show you guys this quick chart that I just made up for you guys to kind of have an idea about what mouth shapes to use for different sounds. So here's the chart that I have. I'll zoom in and kind of go through them one by one. The first one we have here is the FV mouth, which is the mouth biting the bottom lip. This is obviously for sounds like f and v, you know, in words like full or vroom, you know, things like that. It's a very basic mouth shape that you'll only be using for these two particular instances. Moving on to the next one here, we have the ooh, and ooh sound. So these are two different mouth shapes that can be used to accentuate these sounds. So you could use this to ease into this one, or depending on how long the sound is, you may not go into the full ooh mouth. This one here is used mostly just for the ooh sound, and this one is used more for the and w sound. The w may possibly go into that one as well, depending on what the w in your sentence sounds like. Moving on to the next one here, we have the and I mouth. This is the largest mouth that you'll be using in your lip sync. It's used for the very loud sounds. If you are able to view your waveform for your audio, you'll usually see spikes in audio during these sounds. Below that one, we have the A mouth. This one is a size smaller than the and I mouth. You can use this one for just simple A or just very basic mouth sounds, nothing that's too loud. And you can also use it to ease into the and I mouth. Similarly, we have the and S mouth. This can also be shown with just the teeth closed. This can also be used as another in-between pose to going from a very small mouth, perhaps from the closed teeth, to this one, to the larger mouth shapes. And it can... Chestnut, stop it! The closed mouth shape can also be used for a t sound, which will be shown below, and is usually used when it's in the end of a sentence. I personally use the closed teeth mouth for the t sound most often, but there are occasions when I will use the one below to in between into it. Next we have the b, and p mouth. Now it's very important to note that with these sound effects, they are always accompanied with an open mouth after them. If you listen to the b and p, to make those sounds you close your mouth first, but the sound comes from your mouth opening and popping the sound out. The can usually be used without opening the mouth after, so if your sentence ends in an M, you may not have to open the mouth, but just pay attention to your audio. I believe we do have an M sound and a B sound in this audio below, so we should be able to get a good example of what I mean. But basically, if your sentence ends in a B or a P, make sure you open the mouth for at least a couple more frames before fully closing it. And last but not least, we have the L and T mouths. Now I put two different ones here, and let me explain my reasoning for it. So I've noticed with a lot more of the cartoony cartoons on TV today, like the more things that are used with like rigs and stuff like that, that this mouth has been popping up here and there. I've also noticed it in a lot of Warriors maps and stuff, and it's not really something that you get taught in animation school. It's not really acknowledged as a mouth shape for these, but I'm going to explain why I think that this is a useful mouth shape, and why I think so many people have been using it these days. So this is the basic L and T mouth right here. I think the best time to use this one when you do have these sound effects are when you're going from a big mouth shape like the ah and I into the L and T sound. Now, on the other side of that, why I think this mouth can be helpful is if you're going from a S or smaller mouth shape like the M and B. I believe this mouth shape can be very useful. Instead of popping to a wide open mouth with the tongue behind the teeth, a lot of the times you will notice that the tongue will pop out in front of the teeth when your mouth is more closed. This mouth shape is also good for th sound effects as well, so let me just add that in for clarity. Overall, just try and see what works well for your animation, feel it out in your head and when you're planning it out, and just see what feels the most natural to use. You can also try sounding out the audio yourself by speaking the sentence and seeing and thinking about what your mouth does. But try not to overthink it too much, or else you may end up over-animating the mouth. Now let's move into some basic tips for lip sync. One very important thing that you have to know is that on your character, if your character's head is stationary, which it will be for our example, it'll just be a basic mouth that we are animating instead of a full head. So here we have a character, and let's say he's in the middle of a sentence. It's very important to note that your top jaw will never move while talking. So because of this, if you're drawing a character with teeth, the teeth will never move. The teeth will always be in this position. Never move your teeth around, because it will look very strange that your teeth are wobbling from side to side or up and down. Because our top teeth will always stay in the same position. If you're drawing the bottom teeth will always move along with the bottom jaw. And another thing to note with the jaw is that the top lip will very rarely move unless your character is doing like a sneer or something like that while they're talking. If it's just a basic lip sync for a basic character emotion, it'll only be the bottom of the mouth ever moving, and you rarely ever want to go past this top line. This is also important to note for cats, that their nose and top mouth will not move. There are occasions where if the face is moving around a lot, you can take the liberty to add some squash and stretch to the top nose, only on very fast movements and very rarely. You hardly ever want to move the top jaw. Another thing to note while doing your lip sync is the vowels and consonants. So by vowels, I mean the A, E, I, O, U, and Y sounds. When you're doing sounds like these, which are going to be the majority of your lip sync and noise during talking, you always want to ease in to these sounds. So say you're starting with a closed mouth and your character is going to go into a ah or something like that. You're going to want to gradually get into that bigger mouth shape. But on the other hand, if your character's mouth is wide open and it's going to be going into a t, a v, the more, the consonant sounds, that's basically what I'm trying to say, then you can take the liberty to snap the mouth shut and pop it into the consonant. Because consonants are such strong sounds and they're usually very sharp in the audio, and they come from us blocking the audio from our vocal cords out, you can usually pop into them with no problem. And with that, we will start the process of going through how to lip sync to a set audio clip. And it's important to note, if you don't have a program that you can scrub through your audio, this first part of the tutorial will be kind of obsolete for you. But don't worry, if you're animating in something like Psy, even Photoshop, Fire Alpaca, things like that, in my next map part that I'll be posting for the We See the Light, I plan on doing a tutorial using a program called Magpie that shows you guys how you can plan your lip sync without having a timeline in your program to animate to. But with that said, let me show you what you can do while you do have audio in your timeline, and for those who can't, just keep watching for later on and you can see how the rest of the process of lip syncing goes. So how I usually start off is I'll scrub through the audio and I'll pick out each distinct sound for each frame. It is also important to note that I am doing this on 24 frames per second, working mostly on 2s for this tutorial. The only time you will ever work on 1s for your lip sync is when you are either animating on 1s, or if there are certain mouse shapes that need to be addressed, such as the closed mouth shapes for the M, B, and P. You never want to skip those in your lip sync. So if the sound doesn't land on a frame in your animation, you can either change and have 2 different mouth shapes on the same frame, or you can just have the mouth shape hit a frame earlier. So if that comes up in this animation, I will point out what I mean. So let's start off here by scrubbing through the audio. So you can tell the very first sound is a W sound. Actually, I'm gonna do that. Hold on, I gotta do that in a different layer. Now, if we continue scrubbing, we got the E sound. I'm gonna put 2 E's to signify to myself that's an E and not an E sound. And now the next one is an A. So you'll see in my timeline down here that I'm not doing every single frame. So while I'm scrubbing through it, I'm trying to think of the next mouse shape that would make sense with the audio without putting every different sound that I hear. So before this mouse shape here in the A, there's technically a G sound there, but what you would do for a G, which is a G, would be pretty much the same as what the E mouth is going to be. So I'm going to skip over the Ga sound and just move into the A. Let me keep going into an A. So in this instant, I hear a T sound sort of in there. They're saying more a gotta, not gotta. So they're kind of, using slang term instead of the, proper way to say got the or got a. So since that sound is kind of important to us recognizing the audio a little bit, I am going to put a T there, but I'm most likely going to make it just a smaller mouth in between these frames. So again, I'm going to go back onto 2s now that I finished that T sound there. And now here, you can see here not only in the sound, but also see in the waveform that the sound disappears. When the sound usually disappears like that, that usually means there is an M, or a M, a B, or a P sound in there. And for this one, it's a B sound. So I'm actually going to change this one here right after the B into an sound, because Because, you know, usually after a P or a B sound or a P or a B, you know, it's more of an sound after it. Now we're going back into an M sound here. I think I'm going to leave it at that for that, so we can just kind of watch. It's going to be wobbling around just because I'm not really paying attention to where I'm putting them, but let's just watch the vowels back, or the phonetics back here on the side.
We got a boomer! We got a boomer!
So that kind of gives you an idea on how to figure out the sounds that are coming from the waveform. Now, something that a lot of animators will do while working with lip sync is that once they have their sound planned out like this, they'll usually take their timeline and just shift everything 2 frames back. So if I were to do that, I would just select all these and shift them to, I don't think I can shift them 2 frames back the way it is. Hold on. Now, the reason why people usually do this is because we process visuals a lot slower than we process sounds. So we need to see the visuals first before we hear the sound. So when you play them both at the same time, it'll look like they're coming out at the same time. Now, the only problem with this is because the W sound at the beginning here is very important for the lip sync, we kind of need to include that. So I'm going to move everything back, and I will move that back so that the W is just for 1 frame. And then we'll go more in here. And I will remove this second ah here that was on a 1, but I'll just remove it altogether. So that, sure, these 2 aren't exactly pushed back 2, they're only technically pushed back 1, but then the rest of the audio will be pushed back 2 frames. Now, the reason I'm saying 2 frames is because I'm working on 24 frames per second, which is the animation standard for 2D and most 3D. So if you're not working on 24 frames per second, then this might not apply to you, and I wouldn't quite know how to adjust it for your time speed. But if you're not already working on 24 frames per second, I suggest you do it just to get used to it, especially if you're planning on making animation a bigger hobby or turning it into a job, because most jobs, well, pretty much every project uses 24 frames per second. Now let's get back to the lip sync. So let's just do the lip sync, very small, in this corner, just to give you guys a basic idea. You can also do this in the corner of your animations and have the mouth shapes moving in the corner, just to give you an idea of the mouth shapes that'll be made during the animation, and you can put that into a feline mouth after. So let's start with the W sound here, the W. So his mouth will be starting out, oops, let's start it right here. Just a, oops. So his mouth will be starting out as just a very small, let's just do a quick oval shape, why not? I'm even going to throw some teeth in there just to kind of demonstrate the teeth rule that I explained earlier. So now we go to the next frame, which is the E. I'm also going to turn on my onion skin as well. Alright, so I am lowering the top lip just slightly, more than the O or oo mouth, but that's because when you're doing an oo mouth, you are pushing your lips and pursing them vertically. So when he goes into the E mouth, the lips will be relaxing and being pulled outward more. So now I'm just doing a slightly larger mouth here, keeping the teeth in that same spot. I'm not entirely happy with where that T sound is hitting, so I might actually push it back one frame again. And again, like I mentioned before with the pushing the frames back, that can be optional, you don't have to do it. Like I said, it may just sometimes make your lip sync look like it's hitting the right notes. But sometimes when it comes to the B, like the B, T, M, P, and T sounds, sometimes it's better to hit those right on the audio cues because they are such strong sounds. So if for this instance, that's what I'm going to be doing with the gotta, with the T and gotta, as well as probably with the B and M sounds. I might even just make that T the one frame. Oops. So yeah, the teeth may not be staying perfectly still just because I'm rushing through here, but you'll get the idea. You also have to be careful, which is something that I kind of forget sometimes while doing the lip sync with the teeth. You gotta be careful not to shrink the teeth as well when you're doing the onion skinning, because you also want to keep the width of the teeth the same. Alright, well let's play that back and see how it looks.
We got a boomer! 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 We got a boomer!
So I mean, it does move around a little bit since I wasn't being exactly precise as to where the top of the mouth was staying throughout the whole lip sync. But overall, it works pretty well. There are a couple places where I probably shouldn't have made the mouth so wide, but just for demonstration purposes, I kept it the way it was. So yeah, that's basically the beginner's guide to lip sync. If you guys wanted to make it even simpler on yourself if you're animating humans, pretty much what we do while working with rigged animations is that we'll just have a preset mouth for all these sound effects, and we just go in between these already made mouth shapes doing the lip sync. So if you want to do lip sync quick and dirty, you can always copy and paste your mouth shapes for the lip sync. So I hope that was helpful, guys. If you guys want a copy of this mouth chart here, there will be a cleaned up version in the description below, just on my DeviantArt stash. So like I said in the beginning of the tutorial, guys, keep a lookout in the future for my tutorial on how to lip sync without being able to add sound to your program. And hopefully that will answer any lip syncing questions you guys have. Of course though, if you have any more, feel free to ask more questions in the description and I'll try and address them in future tutorials. But with that, guys, I'm gonna be out of here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Just wanted to give a shout out at the end of my video to all my wonderful patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for all your support, it really means a lot. And if you guys want to join like all these lovely maroons, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. There's also a link to my Ko-fi that is used for one-time donations. Thanks again, guys, your help is so greatly appreciated.